I never imagined that one day my own family would turn against me in such a brutal and humiliating way. If you're rewatching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Let me back up and tell you how for most of my life I tried to live quietly with dignity, never asking for too much, never demanding recognition. I was simply a mother who loved her son more than anything, who sacrificed so much of her life to make sure he had opportunities one could never dream of for myself. My whole world revolved around him, and in my heart, I always believed that love would one day return to me in the form of respect, care, and gratitude. But I was wrong. Very wrong. It all began in ways that now seem so subtle I almost blame myself for not seeing the danger earlier. A sarcastic comment here, a controlling suggestion there, and slowly, drop by drop, the poison of manipulation was being fed into my life. First, I brushed it off. After all, don't all young people think they know better than their parents? When my son Ethan introduced me to Juliet, his fiancée, I wanted to embrace her as the daughter I never had. She was beautiful, confident, full of charm. Her smile could light up a room, but her eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes, were the first sign that something darker lived beneath her perfect appearance. Still, I ignored my instincts because I wanted my son to be happy. For months, I endured little remarks that cut deeper than they appeared. Juliet would suggest that I was getting old, that I shouldn't be living alone, that perhaps it was time to think about what would happen to my home after I passed. She phrased it sweetly as if she cared, but there was always a sharp undertone. I told myself not to overthink, that maybe she just wanted to feel secure about her future with Ethan. But as time went on, her comments became less subtle, and Ethan, my own son, stopped defending me. Instead, he would nod, sometimes even agree with her, leaving me feeling more isolated each day. The breaking point came on the night of their wedding. Weddings are supposed to be about love, celebration, family coming together, and joy. But for me, that evening was the most humiliating night of my life. The music was loud, the guests were laughing, glasses clinked with champagne, and everyone seemed enchanted by the glowing bride and groom. But beneath that glittering surface, a storm was building, one that would crash down on me with violence I never expected. Juliet approached me with that same polished smile she always wore in public. She leaned close, her perfume heavy, her voice a whisper laced with venom. "Aurora," she said, "the greatest gift you could give us tonight would be to disappear from our family." My heart stopped. I stared at her, waiting for her to laugh and say it was a joke. But her eyes were cold, deadly serious. In that moment, something shattered inside me. Before I could even respond, she extended her hand, not to shake mine, not to embrace me, but to demand my house keys. I refused. Of course I refused. That home wasn't just a building. It was the last piece of my life that belonged only to me, filled with memories of my late husband, with decades of struggles and triumphs, with laughter that once filled the rooms when Ethan was a boy. I couldn't just hand it over as if it meant nothing. My refusal seemed to ignite something in Juliet. Her polished mask cracked, and before I could even comprehend what was happening, her hand came down across my face in front of over 100 guests. The sharp sting of that slap wasn't just physical, it tore through my soul, announcing to everyone in that ballroom that I, the mother of the groom, was no longer respected, no longer valued, no longer considered human in their eyes. The room fell silent for a moment, stunned, before whispers began circulating like wildfire. I stood frozen, my cheek burning, my dignity crumbling, while Ethan, my son, did nothing. He didn't defend me, didn't protect me, didn't even look ashamed. Instead, he stood by Juliet's side, as if silently agreeing that her cruelty was justified. That was the moment I realized I was truly alone in this battle. The rest of the evening was a blur. Guests avoided my eyes, pretending not to notice the humiliation I had endured. A few offered pitying looks, but most stayed quiet, unwilling to get involved. I excused myself, holding my head as high as I could, even though inside I felt broken. My hands trembled as I touched the swelling on my cheek, the physical evidence of my daughter-in-law's audacity. But it wasn't just a slap to my face, it was a declaration of war against my very existence. When I returned home that night, I sat in the darkness of my living room, replaying every moment over and over. I had spent years supporting Ethan, sacrificing my own comfort for his dreams, even secretly helping him financially when he was too proud to admit his struggles. And this was my reward. My own son allowed the woman he married to humiliate me, to treat me as though I were disposable, as though my life's worth could be reduced to a set of house keys. I cried until my body ached, until my tears turned into silence, and in that silence, something inside me began to change. The next morning, my neighbor Joseph came by, as he often did. He took one look at me, at the swollen cheek I couldn't hide, and his eyes filled with anger. "Aurora, what happened?" he demanded. I tried to brush it off, embarrassed, but Joseph wasn't fooled. He listened carefully as I explained, his fists clenching with every detail. When I finished, he leaned back and said words I'll never forget. "This isn't just about family drama anymore. This is abuse. And you don't deserve it." His words planted a seed in my heart. Abuse. I had never thought of it that way. To me, it was betrayal, cruelty, heartbreak, but abuse? That was something different. That was something that couldn't be excused by love. Within days, rumors began spreading in the neighborhood. Juliet, it seemed, wasn't satisfied with humiliating me in public. She began visiting neighbors, planting seeds of doubt about my mental health, suggesting that I was erratic, unstable, unfit to live alone. At first, I laughed bitterly at the absurdity of it, but soon I realized the danger. These weren't idle words. They were calculated moves in a larger plan to strip me of my independence, to paint me as incapable, so that Ethan and Juliet could take control of everything I owned. I confided in Joseph, and he introduced me to Lucy, his niece, and Amelia, another neighbor who had lived through something similar with her own family. They became my allies, standing by me when I felt weakest, reminding me that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't alone. Their support gave me strength, but the fear of what Ethan and Juliet might do next kept me awake at night. Then came the day that Carlos, a lawyer recommended by Joseph, showed up at my door with grim news. Ethan had filed a preliminary petition to have the court evaluate my mental competency. My own son was trying to declare me legally incompetent, using sworn statements from wedding guests who claimed I had acted irrationally, who painted me as a bitter, vengeful old woman. My hands shook as I read the papers, fury rising inside me like fire. How dare they? How dare my own flesh and blood betray me in such a way? But just when despair threatened to overwhelm me, Joseph brought a glimmer of hope. He showed me videos from the wedding that had gone viral on social media. Instead of the narrative Juliet and Ethan tried to spin, people saw the truth. They saw a woman standing up against years of manipulation, refusing to be bullied into submission. Thousands of strangers began leaving comments praising my courage, sharing their own stories of abuse, turning my humiliation into a rallying cry for others suffering in silence. For the first time in years, I felt powerful. I wasn't just an old woman being pushed aside by her greedy son and his ruthless wife. I was a fighter, a survivor, a symbol of dignity refusing to be erased. That night, as I sat surrounded by Joseph, Lucy, and Amelia, I made a decision that would change everything. If Ethan and Juliet wanted war, then war they would have, but it would be fought on my terms. I pulled out the folder I had been secretly preparing, filled with documentation of every insult, every manipulation, every threat. I showed them the medical photographs of my bruised cheek, the evidence of Juliet's assault. "They think I'm weak," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "But they're about to learn exactly who they're dealing with." For too long, I had allowed love for my son to blind me to the truth. But that night, something hardened inside me. I was no longer the mother who would sacrifice endlessly, who would endure silently. I was a woman who had found her voice, her strength, and her resolve. And this was only the beginning. The days that followed felt like walking through a storm with no umbrella, no shelter, only the determination not to collapse. Every knock at the door, every phone call, every letter in the mailbox carried the weight of possible betrayal. Ethan and Juliet had declared war, and they were relentless. I couldn't recognize my son anymore. Where was the boy who once clung to me when thunderstorms scared him? Where was the young man who promised he would always take care of me when his father died? That boy seemed to have disappeared, replaced by someone cold, distant, and disturbingly ambitious. Juliet's influence was everywhere. She was like a shadow that crept into every corner of my life, determined to suffocate me. She visited neighbors more frequently now, weaving her poisonous narrative that I was unstable, forgetful, incapable of managing my own affairs. And the worst part? Some people started to believe her. I could see it in their eyes when they passed me on the street, the cautious smiles, the pitying glances. Rumors spread like wildfire in small communities, and soon I was being treated not as Aurora, the woman who had lived here for decades, but as a fragile old woman losing her grip on reality. Joseph, ever the watchful protector, noticed it too. "They're isolating you," he warned one afternoon as he helped me trim the hedges in the front yard. "It's the oldest trick in the book. Make the victim look crazy, and suddenly no one believes her." His words sent chills down my spine. But as much as I feared Juliet's schemes, I also began to feel something else, a fire that refused to be extinguished. When the official court documents arrived, I felt my heart pound in my chest. Ethan's petition was filled with lies, painting me as paranoid, emotionally unstable, incapable of handling finances. He even claimed I had lashed out violently at Juliet on multiple occasions, fabricating events that never happened. To see my son's signature beneath such accusations was like a knife twisted deep into my chest. How had he become this man? How had my love for him been so thoroughly betrayed? I collapsed into Joseph's arms that evening, sobbing until I could barely breathe. "Why is he doing this to me?" I asked over and over like a broken record. Joseph didn't answer immediately. He simply held me until my tears slowed, then looked into my eyes with a seriousness that shook me. "Because they want control. And they think breaking you is the only way to get it." But what Ethan and Juliet didn't realize was that I had already reached my breaking point at that wedding. I had already felt the sting of public humiliation, the devastation of betrayal. And once you've been broken that completely, you learn something remarkable. You learn that you can survive it. That realization became my weapon. With Joseph's help, I gathered every piece of evidence we could find. Medical records documenting the bruising from Juliet's slap. Witness statements from guests who were horrified at what they saw that night. Financial records showing that I had been independent, responsible, and far from incompetent. Lucy and Amelia helped too, digging through social media posts, collecting screenshots of comments where strangers defended me, calling Juliet out for her behavior. Slowly, piece by piece, we built a wall of truth strong enough to withstand the lies. Still, the nights were the hardest. Lying awake in the dark, I would hear echoes of Juliet's voice, her cruel words replaying like a broken record. "The greatest gift you could give us is to disappear." Sometimes I even began to doubt myself. What if she was right? What if I was just a burden now, clinging to a past that didn't matter anymore? But then I would remember the look in Joseph's eyes, the solidarity in Lucy's voice, the stories of strangers who had endured similar cruelty. No, I wasn't crazy. I wasn't worthless. And I wasn't alone. The first court hearing was scheduled for a rainy Thursday morning. I remember staring at my reflection in the mirror before leaving, noticing the lines of age, the weariness in my eyes. For a moment I felt defeated. Then I heard Joseph's voice downstairs, steady and strong, reminding me that I wasn't walking into that courtroom as a victim. I was walking in as a fighter. I straightened my shoulders, lifted my chin, and whispered to myself, "They will not take me down." The courtroom was cold, sterile, filled with strangers who would decide my fate. Ethan and Juliet sat on the opposite side, perfectly groomed, their faces painted with concern as if they were the victims in this story. Juliet even dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, pretending to cry. The audacity of it almost made me laugh when Ethan spoke. His voice was calm, polished, the voice of a man who had rehearsed every word. He described me as volatile, irrational, even dangerous to myself. He spoke of incidents that never happened, twisting half-truths into damning accusations. Each lie felt like another stab to my heart, but I sat silently, my hands folded tightly in my lap, waiting for my turn. When Juliet took the stand, her performance was worthy of an actress. She described me as a bitter old woman who couldn't accept change, who had lashed out at her repeatedly, who had threatened to make their marriage miserable. She even produced a fabricated text message exchange, claiming it was from me, filled with venomous words I would never say. Watching her spin her web of lies was like watching a snake coil around its prey. Then it was my turn. My lawyer Carlos guided me gently, his questions simple but powerful. I told my story, not with theatrics, not with exaggeration, but with the raw truth of a mother betrayed by her own son and tormented by the woman he married. I described the slap at the wedding, the humiliation, the smear campaign, the forged documents. And then Carlos presented the evidence, the medical photos, the witness testimonies, the viral video that showed the truth. The shift in the room was almost tangible. The judge leaned forward, eyebrows raised, as the video played on the screen. Gasps filled the courtroom as everyone saw Juliet's hand connect with my face, saw Ethan standing silently by her side. The mask of their deception cracked in an instant. Juliet's tears dried up, her face pale, her eyes darting nervously. Ethan's composure faltered, his jaw tightening as he realized their carefully constructed facade was crumbling. When the hearing ended, the judge didn't issue a final ruling but made it clear that there was significant doubt about Ethan and Juliet's claims. Their case was weakened, but the battle was far from over. Still, as I walked out of that courtroom, I felt lighter. For the first time, I saw fear in Juliet's eyes, not mine. The war had only just begun, but something inside me had shifted permanently. I was no longer just a mother fighting for her dignity. I was a woman reclaiming her life, her voice, and her strength. And I vowed that no matter how long this fight dragged on, I would not stop until justice was served. Because I finally understood. Love can blind you, but betrayal can open your eyes. And my eyes were wide open now. The weeks after that first hearing felt like walking a tightrope suspended over an endless drop. I knew Juliet wouldn't stop, and Ethan, well, I could no longer convince myself he was just confused or being manipulated. He was complicit. Every day that passed without a call from him, without a knock at my door to apologize, confirmed that he wasn't just standing by her. He had chosen her side fully. That truth hurt more than anything. Losing a home, losing money, even losing reputation. None of that could compare to losing the bond one thought unbreakable with my son. But grief had transformed into something new. I had cried until I had no tears left. Now I was determined. Joseph, Lucy, and Amelia became my pillars, my chosen family. We began meeting at Joseph's house every other evening, turning his kitchen into a war room. Stacks of papers, printed screenshots, notes from conversations with neighbors, all of it spread across the table like pieces of a puzzle we were determined to solve. Carlos, my lawyer, encouraged me not just to defend myself but to go on the offensive. "We're not only going to prove their lies wrong," he said firmly. "We're going to hold them accountable for the abuse you've suffered. Assault, defamation, fraud. If they want a fight, we'll give them one." His confidence became my anchor. Still, there were moments of doubt. Sometimes, late at night, I would stare at an old photograph of Ethan as a child, his gap-toothed smile, his small hands clutching mine, and wonder how we got here. How did that sweet boy turn into the man who could look me in the eyes while his wife struck me, and do nothing? A part of me wanted to believe he could still be saved, that if Juliet's influence were gone, maybe my son would return. But another part whispered the painful truth. Maybe this was who he had always been, and I just refused to see it. Juliet, meanwhile, doubled down on her campaign. Flyers appeared in the neighborhood, crudely suggesting I needed medical supervision. I found one taped to my mailbox and tore it down with trembling hands. Neighbors whispered more openly now, some sympathetic, others wary. Juliet's family even began showing up, lingering outside my property, watching me like vultures circling prey. The intimidation was clear. One evening, I heard pounding on my door. When I opened it, Juliet stood there with two of her cousins. Without a hint of shame, she said, "Hand over the keys, Aurora. The sooner you accept this, the easier it will be for everyone." Her cousins smirked behind her like hyenas. My blood boiled, but I stood my ground. "This is my home," I said firmly, gripping the edge of the door. "And you will never set foot in it as long as I'm alive." Her face twisted, the sweetness gone, replaced by pure malice. "We'll see about that," she hissed before storming off. That night, Joseph insisted I stay at his place for safety. As we sat on his porch watching the sunset, he turned to me. "They're going to push harder, Aurora. They're hoping to break you. But you're stronger than they realize." His faith in me was a lifeline. The next court date came faster than I expected. This time, Juliet's lawyers tried a new tactic. They brought in so-called witnesses to testify that I had been erratic, that I had threatened Juliet, that I was prone to outbursts. It was surreal, sitting there listening to strangers lie about me as if they knew my life. My hands clenched in my lap, nails digging into my skin, but I kept my composure. Carlos, calm as ever, dismantled each lie. He presented neighbor testimonies in my defense, evidence of Juliet's harassment, and even financial statements proving my stability. Then came the turning point. Joseph took the stand. With steady conviction, he described witnessing Juliet's aggression, her manipulation, her smear campaign. He wasn't just a neighbor. He was a man respected in our community, and his words carried weight. The judge listened carefully, her expression unreadable. But I saw the shift in the courtroom, the way Juliet's smug smile faltered, the way Ethan avoided my gaze. For the first time, the power dynamic tilted ever so slightly in my favor. After the session, I sat outside the courthouse breathing in the cool air. Lucy squeezed my hand. "You were incredible in there," she said softly, but I shook my head. "I don't feel incredible. I feel tired." She looked at me with surprising fierceness. "That's what makes you incredible. You keep going even when you're tired." Her words settled into me like a quiet flame, but Juliet wasn't finished. A week later, I woke to find graffiti sprayed across my fence. "Crazy Witch." The cruelty was staggering. Joseph helped me scrub it clean, his jaw tight with fury. "She's losing control," he muttered. "That's why she's getting desperate." Desperate she was. One night, as I prepared for bed, I heard glass shatter in the kitchen. My heart raced as I grabbed the phone, calling Joseph before creeping downstairs. A rock lay on the floor, the window shattered. Tied to the rock was a note. "You won't win." My hand shook so badly I dropped the paper. Joseph arrived within minutes, his face pale with anger. The police were called, but nothing came of it. No fingerprints, no evidence. Juliet denied everything, of course. But I knew. I knew this wasn't just about property anymore. This was about domination. Juliet wanted me erased from my son's life, erased from the community, erased from the world. And Ethan, he was letting it happen. The day of the third hearing, something remarkable happened. Strangers showed up outside the courthouse holding signs that read, "Justice for Aurora," and "Protect the elderly from abuse." Somehow, my story had spread beyond social media into local news. Cameras flashed, reporters asked questions, and for once, the narrative wasn't controlled by Juliet. For once, I wasn't invisible. Inside, the tension was electric. Juliet looked rattled, her confidence cracking under the weight of public scrutiny. Ethan looked smaller somehow, his bravado slipping. When the judge addressed me directly, asking if I had anything to say, I stood tall. My voice didn't tremble as I said, "I am not crazy. I am not incompetent. I am a mother who raised a son, who sacrificed for him, and who is now being punished for existing. I will not disappear quietly." The silence afterward was deafening. The judge's eyes softened, if only for a moment, before she nodded and moved on. That night, as we celebrated a small victory at Joseph's house, I realized something profound. Whether I won or lost legally, I had already reclaimed something priceless, my voice. Juliet had tried to strip me of dignity, to paint me as weak, but I had shown the world that I was anything but. Still, I knew the battle wasn't over. Juliet wouldn't stop until she was completely destroyed or until I was. And as much as the thought terrified me, I also felt a strange calm settle over me. Because now, I wasn't just defending myself. I was standing for every person who had ever been silenced, dismissed, or betrayed by the people they loved most. And I would not back down. The months that followed were unlike anything I had ever experienced. The courtroom battles had evolved into a grueling chess game, where every move was calculated, and every misstep could be exploited. Juliet and Ethan were relentless, but so was I. I had discovered a resilience within myself that I never knew existed, a force fueled by the injustice they had tried to inflict upon me and the determination not to let my life be dictated by fear. Joseph, Lucy, and Amelia became more than support. They were strategists, chroniclers, and my connection to sanity. Every evening, the three of them would gather with me in my living room, notes in hand, laptops open, discussing witness statements, analyzing previous court testimonies, and going over every single detail of the harrowing night of the wedding. It was exhausting work, but it was cathartic. Each note, each photograph, each small revelation was a stitch in the quilt of my vindication. The turning point came when Carlos, my lawyer, informed me that Ethan had filed a preliminary petition to question my mental competence. My heart sank for a moment, but I refused to let panic take hold. "They're trying to gaslight me publicly," I said, gripping my hands tightly. Carlos nodded solemnly. "Exactly. They want the court to see you as irrational, emotionally unstable, financially reckless. But the truth is on our side. He handed me a thick folder, bulging with statements and documents. We will show that any so-called erratic behavior is in fact rational, calculated, and justified. And more importantly, we will reveal the lengths they have gone to manipulate and intimidate you. The first court session was tense. I sat stiffly in the witness stand, feeling the eyes of the courtroom pierce through me. Juliet sat across the room, her smug expression like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. Ethan's face was blank, unreadable, yet I could feel the underlying tension radiating from him. The lawyer for Juliet and Ethan began with accusations, spinning tales of my supposed irrational behavior, citing minor disagreements at the wedding, exaggerating emotional reactions into supposed signs of instability. I took a deep breath. When my turn came to speak, I recounted my side clearly, calmly, and without the emotion they tried to paint as madness. I described the harassment, the threats, and the emotional abuse that had escalated over years. I spoke of the slap Juliet had delivered in front of over 100 witnesses. I outlined every calculated move they had made to undermine my autonomy. The courtroom grew silent, hanging on each word, as if justice itself were listening. Then came Joseph's testimony. Calm, precise, and unwavering, he described everything he had seen, every action of Juliet and Ethan that corroborated my claims. He spoke of the intimidation tactics, the subtle manipulations that escalated into overt aggression. His presence, his credibility, and his unwavering loyalty shifted the atmosphere in the courtroom. I felt a surge of gratitude but also a spark of empowerment. I was no longer alone in this fight. The turning point came unexpectedly. A neighbor, Mrs. Caldwell, stood to testify. She described watching Juliet's confrontations, her aggressive behavior, and the way she had coerced witnesses into making statements in her favor. One by one, other neighbors added their observations, their words dismantling the carefully constructed narrative Juliet and Ethan had tried to create. By the time the session ended, the momentum had shifted. The courtroom that had once felt like a cage now felt like a place where truth could breathe. Outside, the world seemed to take notice. A local news crew had captured glimpses of the court proceedings, and within days, social media was ablaze with support for me. Videos of my testimony went viral, comments praising my courage flooded in, and I realized that this was no longer just a personal battle. It had become a symbol. Seniors, their friends, and even younger viewers began sharing their own stories of family manipulation and abuse. The energy was palpable, a wave of solidarity that carried me forward. But the harassment continued. One night, a window near my bedroom was shattered, a rock tied with a note reading, "You won't win." My hands trembled as I picked it up, but I refused to let fear dominate me. Joseph, Amelia, and Lucy insisted I stay with them for a few nights, but even that wasn't enough to dampen my resolve. I was determined to reclaim my life, my dignity, and my truth. As the legal battles continued, I began documenting everything meticulously. Every letter, every text, every interaction with Juliet and Ethan was recorded and analyzed. Medical reports of the slap, financial statements showing the integrity of my accounts, and photographs of the wedding scene. All were organized in a way that built an unshakable case. I realized that this was no longer just about defending myself. It was about exposing a pattern of abuse that had likely affected others in silence. One evening, while sorting through my documentation, I realized the importance of sharing my story publicly. Not just in court but with the world. The viral videos of the wedding had already sparked conversations, but a full account, my words, my perspective, my truth, could become a beacon for others. I reached out to a journalist specializing in elder abuse stories. Within weeks, we had crafted a detailed article that was published in a national newspaper. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Messages poured in from people thanking me for speaking out, for validating their own experiences, and for giving them courage to confront their abusers. The momentum built toward the next court session. With public opinion on my side, I felt a renewed strength. Carlos advised me that while the court would ultimately rule on the legal merits, the social support I had garnered could not be ignored. The judge, too, seemed to notice the weight of public scrutiny, the undeniable presence of truth presented in multiple forms: testimony, evidence, and widespread social support. The day of the hearing, I entered the courtroom with a sense of calm I had never experienced before. Juliet glared at me, her confidence shaken. Ethan avoided my eyes, a mixture of anger and frustration in his expression. As the session progressed, witness after witness dismantled their claims. Each testimony, each piece of evidence presented by Carlos, painted a picture of manipulation, harassment, and abuse. By the time I took the stand again, I felt no fear, only clarity and purpose. When I recounted the slap, the intimidation, and the emotional manipulation, the courtroom held its collective breath. The judge's eyes softened slightly, the jury leaned forward, and Juliet's face contorted with disbelief. For the first time, I felt that truth and justice were aligned in my favor. The verdict, when it came, was decisive. The court dismissed the petition questioning my mental competence and imposed fines on Juliet and Ethan for legal frivolity and harassment. The weight lifted from my shoulders was immense. I had not only defended myself but had established a precedent. Abuse, manipulation, and coercion, no matter the guise, would not be tolerated. In the months that followed, I decided to take my story further. I began speaking publicly about elder abuse, financial exploitation, and the importance of asserting one's dignity. The foundation I established, supported by Joseph, Lucy, and Amelia, grew rapidly. We helped seniors reclaim their finances, assert their legal rights, and most importantly, regain their self-respect. 2 years later, my life had transformed completely. The apartment that Juliet had once coveted became a sanctuary, a place of peace and creativity. I taught community gardening classes, wrote books, and mentored other older women facing similar challenges. Carlos managed not only my finances but the foundation's legal affairs, ensuring that no other senior would be exploited as I had been. Ethan tried to contact me only 3 times over 2 years, each attempt centered around financial demands rather than genuine reconciliation. The pain of missing my grandson remained, but I had created a trust fund for his future, ensuring that he would be cared for even if our personal relationship remained fractured. Looking back, I realized that the pain, betrayal, and abuse I had endured had led me to a purpose greater than any I could have imagined. I had discovered a strength I never knew existed, built a network of support that transcended blood ties, and turned my story of suffering into a beacon of hope for others. I understood now that family was not merely defined by birth, but by respect, love, and the willingness to protect one another. I had learned that true courage was standing firm in the face of betrayal, and that dignity was not given, it was claimed. The journey had been excruciating, yet it led to liberation, not only for me but for countless others who had felt powerless in the shadow of those who sought to control them. And as I reflected on these years, I realized that the story was far from over. There were still cases to handle, seniors to protect, and lessons to share. The battle had not been just about reclaiming my life. It had been about rewriting the narrative for all who were silenced, marginalized, or abused. I had become, unwillingly at first, a symbol of resistance, and I embraced that role with every fiber of my being. A quiet morning that felt heavier than usual, not because of anything external, but because of the weight of responsibility I now carried. The Aurora Hughes Foundation for the Protection of Seniors had grown beyond my expectations, and every new case that landed on my desk reminded me how pervasive family abuse really was. Carmen, our coordinator, had just walked in with a stack of files, each thicker than the last. "Aurora, we have 27 new cases this week," she said, her voice a mixture of frustration and determination. Each file represented a life disrupted, dignity stolen, and autonomy undermined. The stories were variations on the same theme: adult children pressuring their aging parents to relinquish property, manipulate finances, or compromise their independence. Some were subtle, a seemingly innocent suggestion or a sly comment designed to make the senior doubt their own judgment. Others were blatant threats or even physical intimidation. I spent the morning poring over each file, my eyes scanning the testimonies, the legal documents, and the photographs. There was Mrs. Lewis, a 74-year-old widow, whose son had convinced her to transfer ownership of her vacation home under the guise of protecting it for the family, only to discover he had used the proceeds to pay for a gambling debt and a luxury vacation abroad. Then there was Mr. Thompson, 69, whose twin daughters had blackmailed him with threats of never seeing his grandchildren again unless he signed over $50,000. Each story was a mirror of my own past, yet each demanded attention and action. Joseph joined me in the afternoon, his energy undimmed by the constant flood of cases. "Aurora," he said, leaning over the table. Every time I read these, I feel like we're fighting ghosts. They're invisible, yet the damage they do is real. I nodded, feeling the truth in his words. But ghosts are powerless once you shine a light on them, I replied. That light, I realized, was both legal and social. The combination of meticulous documentation, public awareness, and unwavering advocacy that had become the Foundation's signature approach. Our work was demanding but also deeply rewarding. By mid-afternoon, I had coordinated with our legal team to file injunctions in several cases, ensuring that the seniors' assets were protected while investigations proceeded. Social workers were assigned to provide emotional support, ensuring that the victims felt seen and validated. Psychologists prepared sessions to help them process the betrayal, anxiety, and depression that often accompanied such abuse. I realized that recovery was not just financial. It was psychological, emotional, and deeply personal. As the sun set, I allowed myself a rare moment of reflection. The apartment, once a battlefield of greed and manipulation, now felt like a sanctuary. I walked past the walls lined with letters of gratitude, photographs of smiling seniors, and framed newspaper articles chronicling the Foundation's milestones. Each artifact was a testament to resilience, courage, and the power of reclaiming one's voice. The next day brought an unexpected challenge. A reporter from a national morning show requested an interview. They wanted me to discuss not only my personal story, but also the broader patterns of elder abuse we were uncovering. I knew this could amplify our reach and potentially protect countless more seniors. The interview, scheduled for the following week, became an opportunity to transform private victories into public advocacy. Preparation for the broadcast consumed several days. Joseph, Amelia, and Lucy assisted in reviewing talking points, ensuring that every word would convey both the urgency of the issue and the hope of possible resolution. We rehearsed scenarios, anticipated difficult questions, and refined the presentation of statistics, anecdotes, and legal insights. By the time the cameras rolled, I felt a mixture of nerves and exhilaration, the same tension I had felt before my first televised interview, but now tempered by experience and confidence. The live segment began with Catherine Diaz, the journalist who had interviewed me 2 years prior, introducing the story with warmth and authority. Today we explore the growing crisis of elder abuse within families, she announced, turning to me with a reassuring smile. Aurora Hughes has become a national symbol for standing up against this abuse. Mrs. Hughes, can you tell us why this issue is so pervasive? I took a deep breath, looking directly into the camera. Elder abuse is rarely a sudden event. It's a slow erosion of dignity, a gradual undermining of confidence and independence. It starts with manipulation, subtle pressure, and emotional coercion. And the most insidious part is that it often comes from those who claim to love you. By the time the abuse becomes visible, the damage is already profound. Catherine nodded, prompting me to share more. I spoke of our foundation's work, the dozens of cases we were handling, and the importance of early detection. I recounted stories carefully anonymized of seniors who had almost lost their homes, savings, and self-respect, but who were now reclaiming their lives. I emphasized that seeking help was not a sign of weakness but an assertion of rights and dignity. The interview concluded with a direct message to viewers. If you or someone you know is facing similar circumstances, do not wait. Document everything. Reach out to professionals. And remember, you have the right to say no, to set boundaries, and to protect your life and your dignity. The response was overwhelming. Emails and phone calls flooded the Foundation's offices, each one a testament to the fact that silence had been the default for too long. Seniors, adult children, neighbors, and advocates reached out, creating a network of vigilance and empowerment. Amidst the growing recognition, personal life continued in parallel. Lucy had moved permanently into the apartment next door after her divorce, seeking the stability and inspiration she found in our shared purpose. Together, we organized workshops on financial literacy for seniors, teaching them to identify warning signs, read contracts carefully, and maintain control over their assets. Joseph led lectures on detecting subtle manipulations, sharing insights from decades of life experience and his work with our foundation. Amelia became the psychological anchor, guiding victims through trauma, anger, and grief with patience and understanding. Despite the intensity of our work, I began to notice profound changes in myself. Sleep came easier, my anxiety diminished, and my posture and energy returned. Chronic headaches that had plagued me during the years of conflict were gone. The transformation was both physical and emotional. A mind liberated from fear and a body responding to reduced stress. Dr. Hernandez, my physician, remarked during a routine checkup, "Aurora, it's remarkable how much improvement occurs when toxic stress is removed. You're thriving." The foundation's impact extended beyond individual cases. We had successfully advocated for legislation to provide greater legal protections for seniors against coercion and financial exploitation by family members. Our workshops and community programs had inspired similar initiatives in neighboring cities, creating a ripple effect of awareness and prevention. Yet, not all personal wounds had healed. My relationship with Ethan remained strained. He had attempted contact 3 times, always centered around financial need, rather than genuine reconciliation. His perception of reality remained skewed, viewing consequences as external injustices rather than outcomes of his actions. I had accepted that forgiveness did not require reconciliation, and that love for him did not obligate me to endure further abuse. My grandson Oliver, now 14 months old, remained a point of emotional vulnerability, yet I had established a trust fund to secure his future education and welfare. The most profound lesson I had learned was the power of boundaries. Every case we handled reinforced the notion that self-respect and self-protection were not acts of selfishness but necessities. Elder abuse, whether emotional, financial, or physical, thrived in silence and ambiguity. By asserting limits, documenting interactions, and seeking legal and social support, victims could reclaim autonomy and dignity. 2 years into the foundation's operation, the apartment, once a symbol of attempted exploitation, had transformed into a hub of mentorship, education, and empowerment. Walls were lined with letters of gratitude, photographs of seniors who had reclaimed their lives, and diplomas marking public lectures and awards. The environment radiated purpose and affirmation, a stark contrast to the tension and fear that had once permeated every corner. Margaret, a 74-year-old woman we had mentored, sent a photo of herself proudly sitting in her newly purchased car, a vehicle she had acquired after recovering funds that had been taken from her illegally. Her message read, "Aurora, you taught me that self-love is survival, and courage is reclaiming what is rightfully mine." Moments like these reinforced the value of every battle fought, every boundary set, and every case carefully documented. Books, workshops, and media appearances multiplied. My first book had become a national bestseller, its proceeds funding the foundation's operations. A second book, now in progress, aimed to provide practical strategies for detecting and preventing family financial abuse, based on real cases we had successfully resolved. Every lecture, every article, and every seminar became a platform to educate, protect, and empower. Physically, mentally, and spiritually, I had undergone a transformation. Chronic stress had been replaced by purpose. Fear had been replaced by empowerment. Loneliness had been replaced by community. The journey had been excruciating, yet it led to liberation not only for myself but for countless others who had endured silent abuse. Looking ahead, I plan new initiatives. Regional centers for support, documentaries to raise public awareness, and collaborations with legislators to strengthen protections. Each project was designed to magnify impact, ensuring that the struggles and lessons of one woman's experience could protect thousands more. And yet, the most enduring lessons were personal. I had learned that love alone does not justify sacrifice to one's own detriment. I had learned that dignity is not optional, it is essential. I had learned that the end of a toxic relationship is not a loss. It is liberation, an opportunity to reclaim a life of authenticity, respect, and purpose. As I sat on my balcony, reflecting on the transformation of the last 2 years, I felt a profound peace. The pain of betrayal and manipulation had been transformed into a mission, a network, and a beacon for others. I had walked through the fire and emerged not only intact but stronger, wiser, and more determined to protect the vulnerable. The quiet hum of the city outside my apartment, a gentle reminder that life continued despite everything. The Aurora Hughes Foundation had reached a rhythm, a steady cadence of urgent cases and rewarding victories. Every morning, Carmen brought new files, each one a testament to the ongoing struggle against elder abuse. But alongside the work came moments of reflection, when I allowed myself to marvel at how far I had come. The Foundation's third regional center had just opened its doors, a spacious sunlit building designed to be both welcoming and empowering. Seniors who had long felt invisible or powerless now had a place where their voices were heard, their concerns validated, and their rights defended. Joseph had organized a ceremony to inaugurate the center, inviting local officials, journalists, and community leaders. As I gave a brief speech, I felt the warmth of collective purpose, the realization that what had started as one woman's struggle had blossomed into a movement capable of transforming lives. We are here not only to protect, but to empower, I told the audience, my voice steady and firm. Every senior deserves dignity, autonomy, and respect, and it is never too late to reclaim what is rightfully yours. Applause filled the room, but it wasn't the only reward. Each handshake, each grateful smile, reinforced that the battles we fought were meaningful, not just symbolic. Back at the office, the daily routine resumed, reviewing cases, coordinating legal action, and mentoring seniors on financial literacy. But in the evenings, I allowed myself quieter moments of reflection. I often sat on my balcony sipping tea, watching the sunset paint the city in gold and rose. Here, removed from the daily whirlwind, I could measure the true extent of the transformation in my life. The apartment, once a source of conflict and attempted control, now pulsed with purpose, creativity, and the presence of people who had chosen to be family. Lucy, now firmly established as the foundation's educational director, would often join me on the balcony discussing strategies for workshops and awareness campaigns. "Aurora," she said one evening, "you've taught me that courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet, consistent, and persistent. And that's what makes it so powerful." I smiled, recognizing that our relationship had evolved into something deeper than blood, a connection forged through respect, trust, and shared mission. Amelia, whose expertise in psychology had been invaluable in guiding victims through trauma, remained a constant presence as well. Together, we developed specialized counseling programs, focusing on the subtle forms of manipulation often overlooked in cases of elder abuse. Emotional recovery, we realized, was just as critical as legal restitution. Healing the mind, rebuilding confidence, and restoring the sense of agency were the cornerstones of our work. 2 years had taught me that the most insidious form of abuse is invisibility, the way it can make a person question their own reality, doubt their worth, and retreat silently into resignation. My own experience had been a testament to this. The moments of betrayal, emotional blackmail, and public humiliation had been devastating, yet they had also provided the foundation for a new life of empowerment and advocacy. Ethan, my son, remained a complex figure in my life. His attempts to contact me were always centered on need, never reconciliation. Financial requests, attempts to manipulate, and occasional appeals through intermediaries were met with firm boundaries. I had learned that love alone could not repair a relationship tainted by repeated exploitation. Protecting my dignity, ensuring my autonomy, and maintaining my emotional health were not acts of cruelty. They were acts of survival. My grandson, Oliver, remained a source of quiet sorrow. He was growing up without knowing me, his earliest memories shaped by absence rather than connection. Yet I had created a trust fund for his education, ensuring that his future was secure regardless of our current relationship. Perhaps, Amelia suggested during one of our discussions, when Oliver was older, he would seek answers, and the foundation we built would serve as a testament to the importance of accountability, love, and integrity. The foundation's impact extended beyond individual cases. We had successfully influenced legislative measures, strengthening legal protections for seniors against coercion and financial exploitation. Our workshops had inspired neighboring communities to adopt similar initiatives, creating a ripple effect of awareness and prevention. By empowering seniors, educating the public, and advocating for systemic change, we were reshaping societal perceptions of aging, respect, and familial responsibility. Despite the intensity of our work, life offered moments of quiet joy. The community garden I had helped establish flourished, serving as a sanctuary for older residents to connect with the earth and with one another. Teaching others about medicinal plants, sustainable gardening, and organic cultivation became a source of fulfillment, grounding me in tangible, life-affirming activity. The once tense and empty apartment now echoed with laughter, learning, and the gentle rhythm of purpose-driven life. Letters continued to arrive from seniors whose lives had been touched by the foundation. Each story, each note of gratitude, reinforced the transformative power of advocacy, empathy, and action. Margaret, now thriving after reclaiming her finances, often sent updates, each message reflecting renewed confidence and independence. Her words, "Aurora, you taught me that self-love is survival and courage is reclaiming what is rightfully mine," reminded me daily why the struggle, the heartbreak, and the confrontation had been worthwhile. Books, media appearances, and public speaking engagements became avenues to extend the foundation's reach. My first book, a national bestseller, funded ongoing operations and programs. The second book, focusing on practical strategies to detect and prevent family financial abuse, aimed to empower readers with knowledge, tools, and confidence. Every lecture, interview, and article became a platform to educate, protect, and inspire. Physically and mentally, I was transformed. Chronic insomnia, anxiety, and tension-induced headaches were replaced by restorative sleep, steady energy, and clarity of thought. Dr. Hernandez often remarked on the remarkable turnaround, "Aurora, your health reflects the liberation of your mind. When toxic stress is removed, the body heals." And he was right. Confidence radiated not just in my posture and voice but in the very way I approached life. Yet, 2 years in, the most profound realization remained personal. True family is chosen, not merely inherited. The people who now surrounded me, Joseph, Lucy, Amelia, and countless others, chose respect, loyalty, and support. They formed a network built on mutual regard, trust, and shared purpose. Blood, I had learned, was not the ultimate measure of connection. Integrity, empathy, and accountability were. The legal battles we had fought, though difficult, had become tools for broader change. By meticulously documenting abuse, engaging legal counsel, and creating public awareness, we had not only protected seniors, but also set precedents that strengthened protections for future generations. The cases we handled were not merely isolated victories, they were part of a systemic shift toward recognition, accountability, and empowerment. Ethan's repeated failures to take responsibility had underscored a harsh truth. One cannot save those unwilling to acknowledge their wrongdoing. Attempts to salvage a toxic relationship only perpetuated harm. Accepting this reality was liberating. Boundaries, once feared as barriers to love, were now recognized as essential instruments of self-preservation and personal integrity. Oliver, my grandson, remained a bittersweet reminder of family lost yet still precious. By securing his educational future and modeling resilience, I offered him the opportunity to engage with his grandmother on his own terms when the time was right. Love, I had learned, was not possessive. It was protective, principled, and patient. 2 years had transformed the apartment, the foundation, and my life. The once contested home now thrived as a hub of mentorship, education, and empowerment. Walls bore the evidence of success. Letters of thanks, photographs of healed families, diplomas, and awards. The space radiated purpose, energy, and the quiet satisfaction of lives changed for the better. Mentorship became a central focus. Older women and men, once isolated and vulnerable, sought guidance and support. Together, we cultivated confidence, reclaimed assets, and rebuilt self-esteem. Margaret's journey, among countless others, was emblematic. A trajectory from victimhood to agency, from fear to empowerment, from invisibility to recognition. Books, media, workshops, and lectures amplified the message. The story that had once been my personal ordeal had evolved into a movement. Advocacy had become action, empathy had become strategy, and personal pain had become collective empowerment. Each initiative, whether legislative advocacy or public education, ensured that the experiences we shared reached beyond the confines of individual cases, impacting thousands across the nation. Physical and emotional health, once compromised by stress and manipulation, flourished. Sleep returned, anxiety diminished, and vitality increased. The transformation was tangible, measurable, and deeply gratifying. Health, I realized, was inseparable from autonomy, dignity, and purpose. Personal relationships had shifted from obligation to choice. Lucy, Joseph, Amelia, and countless others formed a family rooted in respect, loyalty, and shared mission. Blood, I understood, was secondary to integrity, empathy, and accountability. True connection, cultivated through trust and mutual support, became the defining measure of family. Ethan remained a reminder of the limits of love when unaccompanied by accountability. 3 attempts at reconciliation over 2 years were met with firm boundaries. Love without responsibility, I had learned, was insufficient. The ability to protect oneself, assert dignity, and establish limits was paramount. Oliver, my grandson, became a symbol of hope, patience, and principle. While his early years were shaped by absence, I ensured that his future was secure through the trust fund, offering him the opportunity to engage with me when he was ready. Love in its truest form was protective, patient, and principled. The foundation's impact continued to expand. Regional centers, educational programs, legislative advocacy, and media engagement ensured that elder abuse was no longer invisible. Awareness, empowerment, and action combined to create systemic change. By educating, mentoring, and advocating, we transformed individual victories into societal progress. 2 years after that fateful night, my life was unrecognizable from its former shadowed state. The apartment was a sanctuary, the foundation a beacon, and my personal health and confidence fully restored. Every letter, photograph, and document bore witness to transformation. Personal pain had been converted into collective empowerment. Fear had been replaced by action. Silence had been replaced by voice. Reflecting on the journey, I understood that the greatest victory was not legal or financial, it was personal. Liberation, dignity, purpose, and authenticity were the true spoils of a battle fought with courage, integrity, and persistence. Life at 70 had become richer, more meaningful, and deeply authentic. I had discovered that the end of toxic relationships is not a loss. It is liberation. I had learned that true family is chosen, not merely inherited. And I had proven that it is never too late to reclaim one's story, to assert one's dignity, and to create a life of meaning, purpose, and empowerment. When people ask if I regret that night, my answer is unequivocal. Courage, truth, and integrity are never regrets. The life I have built, the lives I have touched, and the systemic change we have initiated are proof that even in the darkest moments, one can forge light. As I close this chapter, I look toward the future with determination, hope, and resolve. The Aurora Hughes Foundation will continue to protect, educate, and empower. Seniors will find guidance, resources, and advocacy. Families will learn accountability. Society will recognize the rights and dignity of every individual, regardless of its somewhat personal story. Once one of betrayal, manipulation, and pain, has become a movement, a mission, and a legacy. Through advocacy, mentorship, education, and empowerment, I have ensured that others will not endure the suffering I once experienced. 2 years later, I am not simply surviving, I am thriving. Health, confidence, purpose, and love define my days. Life at 70 is richer than I ever imagined. The journey has been arduous, the lessons hard-earned, but the reward is profound. A life reclaimed, a mission fulfilled, and a legacy that will endure.